Chapter 14. Ms. Jackson. Vernetta Lee Jackson took a seat in the cozy breakfast nook of her apartment on the 23rd floor of the Trump International Tower on Central Park West. As she sipped her Earl Grey tea, she wondered what she was going to do about her two boys. One was married, the other needed to be. Both were problems. She looked at the grandfather clock in her exquisitely furnished living room. It was 11:30. Vanessa was half an hour late, and she had not called. Unbelievably rude. Mama Jackson had called a meeting with her daughter-in-law so they could discuss schools for her grandson, PJ. She'd already gotten materials from the best day schools in the city because she knew Vanessa, who was probably at home, still in bed, sleeping off a late night, wouldn't bother. Alonzo, Vanessa's husband, was 34, and Lamont Jr. was almost 39, but they were still boys to her, and they always would be. Whenever she heard other parents say they loved all their children the same, she wondered if they were being truthful or just saying what needed to be said. Mama Jackson had said the same thing many times herself, but she wasn't being truthful. She played favorites, but kept it to herself. It wasn't just that Lamont was her first. He was bright and funny as a baby, walking at 9 months. Alonzo was still crawling on his first birthday, and talking a few months later. It took Alonzo so long to utter a word, she feared he might be retarded. Lamont's second word, after Mama, of course, was gimme. Mama Jackson thought of that now and laughed to herself. Gimme should have been his middle name instead of Lavelle. That inborn desire to possess things had served him well. He was bagging groceries at Key Food on weekends, making $40 pocket change by age 10. He always knew how to get his hustle on. He was a good student and kept out of trouble, which took good negotiating skills living in Bed-Stuy, but he was also a big kid who didn't allow anyone to push him around. She wished she could have given her kids everything, but it was a financial impossibility. Her husband was always spending what little extra income they had on card games and the like. But Lamont Sr. was a decent man, and he came home to her every night, which was a lot more than some women could say. She had put herself through nursing school at night while working at a hospital morgue during the day. She just had done clerical work, but the aura of death had gotten to her. After a while, she wanted to move upstairs, where people still had a chance at life. No one in her family had ever gone on to higher education. Getting her nursing degree had been the biggest achievement of her life, after giving birth to her boys. But she wanted more for her children. She hoped she'd be able to send them to prestigious colleges so they could realize their dreams. She'd gotten Lamont information on the best private schools and hoped he could get some student loans, but he decided to go to City College and save her the worry. He was always so thoughtful like that. Now look at him. Lamont had become a success far and above anything she had ever dreamed possible. Knowing his love of money, she had hoped he might become a bank manager or an accountant. A suit and tie nigga. That would have put her over the moon. When he had told her he was going to pursue a career in the music industry, she was now ashamed to admit she hadn't had much faith that he could succeed. But she'd preyed on it. He threw parties during college, but she figured that was just a temporary way to make money. She considered starting a hip-hop label a risky proposition. Who ever thought of owning something? Being his own boss and all that? But if anyone could do it, Lamont could. He made some missteps in the beginning, but she encouraged him to stay the course. "Baby, you'll be the next Berry Gordy," she'd reassure him when he doubted himself. And that's just what he had become. The hip-hop Berry Gordy. An Armani suit and tie nigga. God was good. Yes, he was. Lamont had told her she could quit working at the hospital once he incorporated Triple Large. She didn't mind the hospital, although she still never went to P. Diddy's Labor Day all-white parties in the Hamptons, because it reminded her too much of the life she left behind. But after working on her feet for over 25 years, she'd often get shooting pains up and down her legs. Lamont took care of that, too. He found her the best reflexologist in the city, and sure enough, that wonderful man soothed away all the pains. Thank goodness her ex-husband was too old and infirm to spend Lamont's money, or he'd be in Vegas right now hollering, "Let it ride!" But then, they had Alonzo to carry on that legacy. Mama gazed out of the window at the treetops of Central Park and shook her head in disgust. While she had to admit that Lamont had looked like a brown gerbil as a baby, Alonzo could have been on the side of the Pampers box, he was so cute. She'd wanted to get Alonzo into that, doing modeling or commercials when he was younger, but she didn't have the time and wouldn't have known where to start even if she did. And where have those good looks gotten Alonzo? She wondered sadly. Lamont had taken care of his baby brother, and Alonzo should have been a lot more grateful than he was. After squeaking through high school, being fired from several low-wage jobs, getting arrested twice for drug possession, no convictions, praise Jesus, and 4 DUIs, which got his license revoked, Mama was tired of bailing the boy out. But she couldn't blame him. He was feeble-minded and completely unfocused, not in any way mean-spirited or harmful. He was a failure. Her failure, she felt. At some point, she had stopped hoping that Alonzo would turn over a new leaf and focus on something besides partying and gambling. He was still running off all the time to Vegas or the nearest casino. He thought she didn't know? But she just thanked Jesus Christ, her Lord and Savior, that he wasn't dead or in jail. Now Alonzo was married to this hot tamale who ran through his money as quickly as a woman walking barefoot over hot coals. Not a shocker that they had eloped. Mama would have been there to raise her hand when it was time for objections to be made known. But Vanessa had trapped him. Mama hadn't even believed the girl was pregnant until she started showing. To Mama's great annoyance, Vanessa looked ravishing even in her 9th month. No swollen feet or face, just a perfect little bulge at the center of her perfect little body. Mama hadn't liked Vanessa from the word go. It was clear that Vanessa didn't care for regular black people, just the really good-looking, rich, or famous members of the race. Lamont and Alonzo passed muster, but get her around some folks, and she looked as if she were about to break out in hives. In Mama's hood, blacks and Latinos were 2 peacefully coexisting tribes. Apparently things went down differently in Venezuela. But it was after showing newborn Pedro off at the hospital, saying over and over, with obvious relief, "He's so light, he's so light," that Vanessa had zoomed to the top of Mama's shh list. A creamy dark chocolate woman, Vernetta Lee Jackson, never let anyone run that light-skinned, dark-skinned nonsense on her. A Mama Jackson truism. Let one person make you feel like less, and that's how the next person will treat you. Vernetta was never a truly beautiful woman, but she'd always carried herself as if she were. The truth was she looked better now than she ever had. Pilates had toned her full figure, and regular oxygen facials kept her skin supple and nearly unlined. It was a point of pride with her that she'd never had plastic surgery, so she freely owned up to her real age of 64, and always reminded folks, "Black don't crack," when they commented on her youthful appearance. Her appearance was something she'd always kept up, even when she'd had only a few dollars to spare. She'd bought discount at Loman's, painted her own nails and toes, and had her hair pressed every week at Buckshot Shorty's on Gates Avenue. That was back in the day. It had taken her a minute to get into the groove of spending serious money, and living triple large, as she liked to joke, but she'd found her footing. Now she shopped at Galeries Lafayette in Paris, and Bergdorf's when she was in New York. Had a standing Monday appointment at Georgette Klinger for a full day of beauty treatments, and had her wigs custom made. All thanks to her darling Lamont. Mama checked the time again. Now Vanessa was 50 minutes late. The unmitigated gall. She wanted to wring that girl's neck sometimes. No, most of the time. But she sighed. As much as she disliked the uppity little hussy, Mama had to count her blessings because Vanessa had turned her into a grandmama. Mama called her grandson PJ, as in Pedro Jackson, just to spite Vanessa and remind her that Jackson might not be her last name, but it was the name of her half-black son, and it would be the surname of Ms. de la Cruz's grandkids one day, too. And Mama had to admit that marriage had had a calming effect on Alonzo. He still wasn't doing much at the company, but he'd stopped carousing and getting into bar brawls. He loved being a father and was much better at parenting than Vanessa ever cared to be. But he let his mujer punk his ass on the regular. Whatever Vanessa wanted, Vanessa got. Women. That was a weak spot for both of her sons. Alonzo had already made his bed, but she could still keep Lamont from getting pickpocketed. Although he was a prime target for all these money-hungry harlots, Lamont wasn't a sucker for a pretty face like Alonzo. Attaboy, Mama would think whenever he dumped some dime-a-dozen bimbo who was trying to muscle in on the massive bank account that was supporting the Jackson family. Among all the here-today, gone-tomorrow women Lamont had taken up with, Kendra Truesdale had been a real contender. A well-mannered girl from a middle-class family in Florida, Kendra was the ideal mate for her darling son. Lots of women knew how to make pleasant conversation, but the true gift was knowing when to shut up. Kendra was gifted that way. And unlike so many of these gals today, she wasn't so obsessed with her career as to lose sight of what was truly important: Lamont's happiness. Most important, Kendra paid Mama the respect she felt was her due as the matriarch of the Jackson Empire. Plus, she was black, mocha-skinned, and very shapely. Her parents had come to visit a few times when Lamont and Kendra were an item. Boring small-town people, but they were decent, and Mama liked them. She felt a bit sorry for Harold and Pat Truesdale because they seemed to have the false impression that Kendra was a big-time model actress, when Mama had never seen her in a damn thing except for some rap videos. But she was trying. Mama really thought Lamont had found the one, until he unceremoniously dumped the poor girl. When Mama asked why, he'd cryptically responded, "Never can tell." Kendra came to Mama for advice on getting him back soon afterward. She broke down in tortured sobs, and Mama's heart went out to her. Lamont was such a stellar catch that the pain of having him slip through her fingers must have been unbearable. Mama told her, "Absence makes the heart grow fonder, sweetheart. Don't call him. Let him miss you." Sound advice, or so Mama thought, but after 8 months, Lamont didn't seem to be missing Kendra at all. She decided to ask Kendra to lunch. They were meeting today at Cipriani, Mama's favorite restaurant. She took a last sip of tea, carefully placed her Limoges teacup back on its saucer, and rose from her chair. As for no-show Vanessa, when that money-vacuuming drug fiend crawled out of her hole, she was going to get the tongue-lashing of a lifetime. And Vernetta Lee Jackson was going to love every minute of it. Chapter 15. Funky Fresh Dressed. Like she had just rung up a bottle of shampoo at Rite Aid, the woman behind the register at Scoop said matter-of-factly, "That will be $7,275. Mimi gasped audibly. Vanessa didn't blink. She slapped Lamont's black Amex onto the counter with authority. You had to be a big spender to get an Amex Centurion card. It was invitation only, a leap up from platinum. For Mimi's style makeover, the ladies had carte blanche for one day only. Vanessa had been acting like a contestant on Supermarket Sweep, racking up as much as she could for Mimi and herself in the allotted time. Per Imani's instructions, Mimi had shown up at Vanessa's Soho apartment at 11 this morning. She was shown in by a meek, broken English-speaking woman who was holding the hand of the most adorable boy she'd ever seen. "Miss Vanessa comes soon," the woman told her. Mimi had assumed Lamont's sister-in-law would be black. From the looks of her son, probably not. The boy, whom the nanny called Pedro, grabbed at Mimi's hand as if he were desperate for a playmate and led her to his room. There was a floor-to-ceiling Lion King mural painted around all four walls. Mimi didn't mind the wait because she and cute little Pedro crawled all over the rug playing with his truckload of toys. Over an hour later, Vanessa slunk into the room in an oddly glamorous look that answered the question that the average woman asked herself when flipping through Vogue. Who would buy these outrageously priced clothes and put them together in this way, and where would they go looking like that? Vanessa de la Cruz would. To go on a wild shopping spree with her rich brother-in-law's credit card, that's who. It was a mild March day, so Mimi, wearing jeans and Pumas, was perplexed as to why Vanessa was rocking her fall look. On her feet were what looked like Timberland work boots, but they had skinny wooden heels and pointy toes, and they were pink. Brown corduroys hung low from her narrow waist, and the shrunken hot pink turtleneck exposed her supple stomach. She had a Gucci bucket hat sitting high on her head like she didn't want to mess up her hair, and dark-tinted, goggle-sized glasses covering half her face. "I'm ready," was Vanessa's greeting. Pedro ran up to her for a hug, but she just patted him on the head instead. Mimi couldn't really get a good look at her with the glasses and the hat, but there was something familiar about her. As they headed down to the Ford Expedition Imani had ordered for them, Vanessa grabbed a short olive green bomber jacket with fur trim and an enormous apple green purse. After settling in, Vanessa removed her shades and hat. Mimi recognized her instantly. It was Vanessa de la Cruz, the model. Mimi had seen her in so many magazines. She was Lamont's sister-in-law? "Wow," she gushed. I didn't recognize you at first. Everyone just said Vanessa, Lamont's sister-in-law. I didn't know they meant you." "Lamont's sister-in-law?" Vanessa repeated, offended at the secondary billing. "I always thought you were so gorgeous," Mimi said unabashedly. "Thought?" Vanessa begged her pardon. "Or think?" "Oh yeah, I think you're gorgeous." Mimi corrected herself seriously. "This is so exciting." "Isn't it?" Vanessa agreed, taking a liking to Lamont's new artist instantly. Mimi wasn't sure she could emulate Vanessa's casual chic style, but she wanted to. When Mimi asked where she'd gotten all the things she was wearing, Vanessa was happy to oblige with a rundown. "Manolo," she said, pointing to the boots. "Almost impossible to get, but I'll see what I can do. Pants are Cotillon. Jacket by Marc Jacobs. Sunglasses, Christian Dior. This sweater I got... where? Oh, someone sent me this. I forget who. The bag," she said, stroking it more affectionately than she had Pedro, "is an Hermes Birkin. And the hat is... Gucci," Mimi answered. It had logos all over it. She had never heard of any of those other designers except for Christian Dior, and she didn't know he made sunglasses. "I love your look. I want to get stuff like that," Mimi bubbled, without any real understanding of how much stuff like that cost. Vanessa smiled appreciatively. "De nada, sweetie. Lamont said to hook you up from head to toe." Mimi had wondered if the saleswoman at Barney's, where they had gone first, was going to accept a credit card from a Spanish woman who was probably not named Lamont Jackson. But it hadn't been a problem. Not at Barney's. where they had lunch at Fred's, nor at Bergdorf's, Prada, Hermes, Manolo Blahnik, Jimmy Choo, Chanel, Roberto Cavalli, the Nike Superstore, the Levi's store, Jeffrey, Intermix, or Calypso. Vanessa had coordinated their route so they could work their way downtown. Many of the salespeople knew Vanessa and appeared to be almost salivating when they saw her coming. They were helpful and she was snippy, but they all seemed to be thrilled just to be in her presence. Vanessa hadn't once looked at a price tag. Mimi had tried on a suede coat at Prada and couldn't find the price tag, so she asked Vanessa, in a whisper so the snooty hovering saleswoman wouldn't hear, "How much is this?" Vanessa very loudly replied, "We can afford it." At the other stores, she had puttered around looking at things while Vanessa settled the bill.